There are a few Mcintosh products that are considered legendary. The Mcintosh C222 preamp, the MC275 MK1 power amp, the MC30 monoblocks, and finally the MC240 power amp. Now, as an audiophile, I was really curious as to why are they considered legendary, and because of this legendary status, they're very expensive on the used market. Today, I like to talk about the MC240 power amp. The listed price in 1960 was $288, and I paid over $3,000 Canadian last year for this MC240. Now, the thing about legendary Macintosh products is that they tend to appreciate over time, almost as good as investing in real estate. So the reason why I got it, 100% out of curiosity. Now, for those of you who don't follow me, I've gone through probably, 100 amps by now, and a lot of them are tube amps. So I was wondering if today's affordable amp from Asia, like Willsenton for example, can challenge this Macintosh at a fraction of the price. Also, can my modern Mcintosh 6700 solid-state amp completely destroy this MC240? Logically, it should, right? Because it has 50 years of technological advancement. Now, my MC240 is actually a bit dusty because I have not listened to it for months. But I absolutely do enjoy the amp. Well, my audio buddies, today let me share with you my story with the MC240. Does it live up to the hype? Now, the Mcintosh 240 uses 4 6L6 tubes, 3 12AX7, 2 12BH7, and 2 12AU7. MC2 242 channel, 40 for 40 watts. I guess that's why they call it MC240. The amplifier weighs 56 pounds and is built like a tank. Just like refrigerators from the 80s, this amp will outlive me. I guess engineers at the time did not believe in fancy power cables or speaker cables because I cannot change the power cable with this amp. And if we look at the screw-in type of kind of the binding post, it's almost as if the engineers expect you to use lamb cords for speaker cables. You know how the world has changed. The MC240 has such a unique look that you can tell it is a Macintosh even from a mile away. Now, obviously, the MC240 must sound like angels singing to you to gain that legendary status. Well, I'm sure to MC240 fans it does. Now, there are 4 versions of MC240. I don't know which one I have, but I know my version sounds different than my audio buddy Mr. Vintage's version. You see, he had 2 MC240 in in the older days, and he described his version as sounding a bit rolled off at the top end. Now, my version is actually on the bright side. I was quite surprised because, you expect older tube amps to sound smooth, but nope. Although not as refined as modern amps, it does sparkle and it is surprisingly detailed. Fortunately, the smoother mid-range is what will allow you to listen for long sessions. For some people, that smoothness can be enough to be considered sweet. For me, almost. It uses 6L6 tubes, and for me, these kind of tubes are made more for voice. Yep, the vocals sounds really nice. Good body, smooth and thick. There's air in the presentation, not the most 3D compared to today's amp, but there's still enough of it. The bass is not tight, but does have adequate power for tube amps. Right? Not a fast sounding amp, but you know what? Fast enough. Finally, the amp does not sound thin compared to other 6L6 tube amps I've tried. That's a lot of fat, meat on the bone, and weight. For many people, that is why they would pay the big bucks for the MC240. Above all, the instrument sizing is really convincing. Even at high volume, the soundstage is stable and does not break apart. Solid as a rock and has no distortion. So if I were to think about this logically, what other amp has this overall package? Deckware with the right tubes has a great mid-range, but Deckware has a more neutral presentation, no fat. If you like amps that are ultra warm and have weight, yeah, you would choose the MC240. My audio buddy, Mr. Kanta, has a lot of 6L6 and 6V6 tubes. It's rare to find a tube amp that support these kind of tubes, so he had to ask Fluxion to build him one. Sounds great, but it follows more that modern design where it goes for that neutral sound. So no exaggeration and almost no color. Mr. Vintage, my audio buddy who likes neutral gear, loved that Fluxion amp, while I, who like color, would prefer the MC240. Now, this is just my guess as to why many people like the MC240. It's the whole package where it does everything good enough, even compared to today's newer amp, and it has a very nice mid-range that is unique to the 6L6 tubes. Above all, it has that Mcintosh full-body fat worm sound. Of course, there's that nostalgic factor too. Now, having said that, if you speak to MC240 owner or read their comments, everyone's answer is along the lines, oh, it's very musical and it has that magic. I've never read a comment where someone is able to pinpoint exactly why they love their MC240. Well, maybe that's what makes it legendary. So let me tell you some stories. Now, JP is someone I have known for a while, and he owns an MC240. Now, at one point, he had to recap his MC240, and he brought it to a local store. And the tech said he has listened to hundreds of amps, and the MC240 is the best amp ever. JP's friend also bought an MC240 after listening to it at his home, because he said, man, it just makes music sound so good. Now, the problem with JP is he has manipants, and the MC240 is really pushing its limit driving those speakers. So for the longest time, he's been trying to find a replacement. He even bought a 300-watt, $10,000 solid-state Mcintosh MA8000, hoping to replace the MC240. He told me he invited his friend over to listen to it for an hour, but the second they put the MC240 back, he told me, man, both of them had that same reaction. Oh my gosh, I'm listening to music again. With the MA8000, they said, man, it felt like they were listening to sound. Sure, technically the MA8000 is superior everywhere, but it lacks that emotional connection for them. Recently, JP also bought the classic D200 Class D amp. Now, for those who follow me, you know that is one of my reference Class D amp. Once again, JP listened to it for 2 weeks, and when he put the MC240 back, he was like, wow, the MC240 simply has more musicality. The D200 is amazing, does everything fantastic, but it's just too clean and lacks that magic. Now, Mr. Kanta told him, well, you need to pair the D200 with a tube preamp. So right now, JP is looking for a tube preamp for the D200. My point is, for those in love with the MC240 sound, it's hard to find a replacement. So why not upgrade to the MC275? Well, the MC275 does not have the same sound. After all, MC275 is KT88, uses KT88. MC240 uses 6L6 tubes, not the same. Now, in the comment section, let me know what you think. Can vintage gear compete with modern gear? And for those who have never heard vintage gear before, would you be interested in giving it a try? Finally, do you think tubes still have a place in today's world? Also, please check out my Galleon channel as I've uploaded new videos. So, let's wrap it up. The MC240, okay, I appreciate it and can understand why a lot of people love it. Yes, the amp is to my taste. However, if I have to choose one amp with killer mid-range to live with, it will not be my first choice. In fact, the other day, my audio buddy Mr. Kanta dropped by and we listened to the MC240. I asked him, will you choose this MC240 or the Willsenton R300? He and I actually prefer the Willsenton R300, despite the MC240 have more power, more dynamic contrast, and more mid-range texture. That is because the Willsenton R300 is sweeter sounding, smoother, more laid back, and has a rounder upper mid-range. Now, I'm not saying the R300 is better. No, not at all. Just that if I'm playing with tubes that are known for having good mid-range, then I would choose the one with the sweetest sound, and the Willsenton R300 has one of the sweetest sound I've ever come across. But that is a question of taste, because JP did not care for the Willsenton R300 at all. You know what? One day I'm going to make a mug that says, in hi-fi, it is all a question of taste. So, Let me finish the video with a special appearance, and with that, I will see you next time. I have Mr. Carver here. I call him that because he owns a pair of Carver speakers. What are they, the Carver speakers?
They're Carver Amazing Silver.
I figure I'll make a video on the Mcintosh MC240 because Mr. Carver has never heard a Macintosh in his life, and I have the legendary MC240 in the house. And I was wondering how it would compare to my Mcintosh 6700. No, obviously I know the difference, but I wanted somebody who has never heard Macintosh before, and which one would he choose? Which one would he think is better? Something that's from what, 50, 60 years ago, or the modern Macintosh? Okay, so we listened to 3 tracks. The source was a Cayenne CD player, and what were the tracks?
We had Massive Attack, Radiation Ruling the Nation. There was Monin from Art Blakey, and Norwegian Wood from Corner Shop.
All right, so let's start with the first track. How was it with the MC240?
So yeah, the first one we heard was the Massive Attack track, and I didn't know the speakers that well. Thomas had mentioned that they were shy on bass a little bit. And so I did notice that there was it was lacking the low bass, but in terms of detail and layering, I was just blown away. There was stuff I was hearing that I hadn't heard before, and it was really like, it's an 8-minute track, and you know, I was just planning to listen to the start of it, but then I just had to sit through the whole thing because I was just enjoying it so much.
So you were able to hear it. So you were able to hear things on with the MC240 and the Silverline Sonata that you've never heard on your Carver speaker in your setup.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, so how was it with the 6700?
So yeah, when we put the 6700 in, that was when I realized that his speakers do produce bass, and you know, there was that whole low foundation of bass that I didn't hear with the 240, but it didn't do the layering. Some keyboards in the background that I hadn't heard before, and they weren't as obvious. I mean, once you hear it, it's hard to unhear it, so you know, you're going to hear it again, but it just wasn't as obvious with the 6700.
Okay, so which one do you prefer?
I mean, the 240, you know, on vocals, on layering in the mid-range with some of the electronic track, it was just, it's spectacular. But the 6700 had a foundation of bass and a high end and everything that if I was to choose, I wouldn't be able to live without that bass and the power and the dynamic contrast that I found with the 6700.
So it's not there's no clear winner between both, right?
No, I mean, one track I preferred one track I preferred the other.
Okay, so how was it? What did we listen? The second track, what was it?
Corner Shop was the second track.
Okay.
Norwegian Wood.
That's vocal, right?
Yeah.
So which one do you prefer?
I prefer the 240 for the vocals on that. His voice just had a lot more body and a lot more realism and a lot more emotion. But there was still some dynamic contrast with the guitars coming in, and there's sitar in there, and the sitar had a bit more sparkle with the 6700. But
okay,
you know, the emotion came through better with the 240.
Okay, so in this case, the 240 actually came out better, right? Even though it's 50, 60 years older.
Yeah.
The last track was jazz, right?
Yeah. Okay. Art Blakey.
Art Blakey. Which one do you prefer?
I preferred the 6700, and it was funny because like the track is from the same era as the 240. I mean, they're the you know, pretty much the same age probably, but just with the dynamic contrast that wasn't there with the 240. You know, Art Blakey's playing, it was so much more emotive with the 6700. I think it's pretty obvious that you know, there's no clear winner here. Not one amp isn't better than the other. It really depends on the music, and it really depends on the song, and it depends on your taste.
So, you know, we hear all the time, right, the legendary blah, 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 the legendary blah, 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 and is it really that good? What will you say after listening to both? Do you think it's overhyped, the MC240, or there is something special about it that is worth, you know, its legendary status?
There's definitely something special in how it brings out some details through the middle range, layering, and you know, interestingly with the most modern music, it seemed to do the best with the synthesizers, and they had the electronic effects in the Massive Attack song. It just that's what I had to sit through the whole 8-minute track to listen to that because it was so much fun.
Yeah, the first track was 8 minutes. He sat through the whole thing. It's like originally we planned to listen to like 1 or 2 minutes, right?
Yeah,
but it was so interesting that
that was it. I just we put it on and it just kept amazing me. I'm like, oh my god, what's happening there? And then I never heard that, and it just that's why I was just captivated right to the end with the 240.